Welcome to the 10-Minute Life Lesson Podcast. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne. I train people for improved personal and professional development, offering my assistance to those ready to develop their goals into tangible, focused, and achievable plans of action. And this podcast is one of the tools I use to accomplish my mission. Generally, when the timer hits 9 minutes and 59 seconds on this recording, you'll have a fully developed life lesson that you can take with you and begin to implement immediately. And if this week's lesson has a ring of familiar, then it's probably a reinforcement of a life change you've already started to implement. This podcast falls under the umbrella of my greater personal development efforts, all under the Your Better You brand. For more information on accountability coaching or to gain access to tools, tricks, and life hacks, visit yourbetteryou.info. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. Now, here is this week's life lesson. What if I told you that the opposite of pain is not joy? That when you take a flip side to what joy isn't, it isn't pain. No, there is pain and suffering, and there is joy and happiness, but those two things can actually exist together in the same action, in the same person, in the same thing that you're doing at the moment. The opposite of pain is actually comfort. Yes, being comfortable is the actual opposite of pain. Being in pain means you are feeling something. It may be emotional, it may be physical, but something in your body or soul, if you will, that makes you know that something is definitely wrong. Joy is an emotion you feel when things are going apparently right and you are just overly happy. That's not the opposite of pain. Comfort is the opposite, because when you are comfortable, when whatever is going on does not bother you enough to stir you up in your soul, if you will, then you have no reason to move on. Pain tells you that something is wrong, and your ability to get past it comes from essentially where you are at the moment and who's available to help you and what tools you have to work with. If you have a headache, that's a pain. If it's debilitating, you get some sort of medicine to take care of it, or you go lie down so you can feel better. If you have a slight headache and you just move on through it because you've got to push through it, it may not be the most pleasant feeling in the world, but it is a feeling of comfort. You are okay enough with it to keep on doing what you're doing. That's where comfort is the actual opposite of pain in that sense. So when you're thinking along those levels, you have to think along the levels of how you're trying to manage things in your life. Are you looking to have more pleasure? Or you're looking to minimize the pain? Because there is great in trying to make sure you're having more fun, and there's great to try to make sure you're doing less to have less fun, but they're not the path to the same thing, or they're not going to bring the same to your life, because sometimes the maximizing of pleasure helps in the minimizing of pain and vice versa, but not necessarily they're the same thing. Now, before we get all tongue twistery on this episode, just back up a little bit and go to the basic premise of what you need to learn. Happiness and joy is an emotion that's great to have, but it's fleeting. It's just like a drug. You get so much of it, then it goes away. So the chasing of happiness becomes a problem. Chasing of joy is an issue. Chasing bliss, essentially what people are doing to try to stay high and stay on that up end, is an issue, because while not so much a physical issue as coming down off a drug, sometimes when you have a great emotional high and hit a great emotional lifting, you come down with, the reality. And reality may be just a basic perfect day, a normal day that just isn't as great as the day before. And so many great personal big highs move you along a scale where the lows don't necessarily have to be as low to feel so low. If you have the best day ever all of a sudden, and then you have a string of very low days, and then have another best day ever, you will find that those best day evers are great boosts, and then going back to just being normal you becomes a bit of a chore, a bit of a struggle, pretty much work. Same to be said for lows that work the same way. If you are having just a normal day and all of a sudden the worst thing in your life happens, and as you are taking a few days to get back out of that, another worst thing in your life happens, and another worst thing in your life happens pretty soon after that. Just being a regular, actual, just normal person sounds like might as well be the king of the world. because having sort of normal, just general generic problems is much better than having end of the world type problems. So while you're trying to get to a level in your life that's level, if you will, looking for maximized pleasure or minimize pain doesn't come out to equal out on each other. You don't want to have great pleasures to equalize a great pain, because then you have a very large swoop from top to bottom, from joy to pain, and the comfort level in the middle may be normal, but you only get there from very, very violent swings of happy to sad. That may be more than enough to kill you on its own, let enough just the sadness. But you don't want to have those very big gaps, troughs and valleys, mountains and valleys, I should say, of joy to pain, ups to down. Those aren't where you want to have your equilibrium in the middle. You really want to have sort of a steady life, if you will. And if you live on the upside, that is awesome. You want to have a lot of really, really big joys going on, but you don't want to deep down so low in your pain, because then you feel the real drop. That's where people with depression deal with when they have great days and bad days. That's where people who literally are dealing with addictions are looking for that high we already talked about, because they want to stay on that up and up and up. So maximizing pleasure usually turns into an opposite of the actual reaction. You end up with more pain in the process. Minimizing pain is a totally different thing, because pain is something we're all going to feel. And sometimes we get stuck in a season of life where it's all painful. It all hurts. Everything just isn't going our way literally every single day. And there's no quick fix to it other than to look ahead and keep marching forward. Working to minimize pain, working to make the things that feel bad feel less bad, a way to essentially rise up, bring up the level of your lows so that you have a more consistent level of normal, is a totally different thing. Trying to keep the bad things from making such a serious dip to the lows in your life isn't going to make the highs that much more amazing. It's going to make the highs feel a whole lot better, but it doesn't mean it's going to make a normal high, just an average day, feel like it's going to be a superb, superior day. It feels like an average day. You know it's an average day, but what you know is that that average day is 10 times better than the bad days you're having. So you appreciate the good, the okay for what it is, pretty good, as opposed to needing something that is amazing and massive. These are the type of things you have where a person is just waiting for a vacation because their life is so miserable, they have to get away. They look so forward to that getaway point that it has to be perfect. Everything goes along the lines. It must be a magnificent day. Your bridezillas, if you will, have everything planned down in perfect detail for the wedding, the event, the party, that sometimes they lose sight on the whole point of the wedding, event, and party. It is to lock yourself into a legally binding contract with another human being, supposedly till death do you part. We know in reality, to death do you part isn't necessarily the end-all, be-all to ironclad contracts, but people get so wrapped up in the fact that the wedding must be beautiful and the reception must be great and everyone must be perfect in their dance party little action that they have these days. They lose fact of the sight that there's another person they're supposed to be focusing on and spending the rest of their lives with, sharing good and bad and a lot of other things in between. So a great wedding or a bad wedding should not be what ruins the relationship. The relationship has plenty of things that will go on in time that will ruin it itself. But the good, the bad, and the ugly are something that you must deal with just in life in general. Moving forward, you must know whether you are dealing with, yes, too many good things in your life because you're maximizing the pleasure, which makes having a normal day not feel so great. In fact, makes it feel like it's bad. Or if you are trying to minimize pain, if you really are in a bad situation and you want to make it feel a little bit better until you can get somewhere that is much better to just live at. These are two competing consequences, two competing circumstances that you must realize what you're working towards or what they're working against in the process. Remember, as we said, the opposite of pain is not pleasure, so chasing those opposites aren't going to fix it. The opposite of pain is just comfort. You're looking for comfort. Believe it or not, that's the goal. Not happiness, just comfort. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. We are proud of the progress we are making in this thing. Didn't know when it started 9, maybe 10 years ago. I have to go look at the numbers. It's been that long, especially with the 4.5-year break. That makes a difference. That the 10-Minute Life Coach podcast would turn into this here, 10-Minute Life Lessons podcast, and it would go so far and so strong. You never really know when you start an endeavor how much it will mean to you and how far as it goes along and how much it means to the others that you're making it for. And trust me, I am doing this partially for me, but mostly for you out there to learn something from, enjoy from, and yes, get a little chance to critique. Because some people just like some people enjoy buying red pens and marking things up. Those people are out there, trust me. So hopefully this week we gave you something to chew on, something to think about, something to consider and ponder, and plenty of stuff to mark up. Let me know what you think about this podcast and the other podcast that's married to the website, yourbetteryou.info. That is, of course, Steps Your Better You. At the website, as I said, yourbetteryou.info, and email me on information on either one of those or other things at the website at yourbetteryouinfo@gmail.com. You can find me at jcliffandpayne.net, my main website, and email me at jcliffandpayne@gmail.com. And for this, I ask you, because it helps, to share the podcast with many people who are like-minded like you, looking for improvement and want real actions, real tips to help them move on, not just looking to be entertained. A lot of this industry is people entertaining people enough to keep them around to buy more stuff. That's more entertainment, edutainment, than it is actual education and improvement. I like to think I'm more on the improvement than entertainment, for whatever that is worth. So share it with others. We are found wherever you found us, and we're pretty much any podcast, good, bad, or indifferent, or comfortable, can be found out there on the internet. Make sure you are actually subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss out on the new episodes as they come out weekly, and check in with us every so often to see how we're doing. And you'd be surprised how many people who have checked in with me that I've reached out and checked into as a regular scheduled check-in thing. I do that because often I need checking in on, and I'm sometimes a bit difficult with that, so I know other people get in the same boat as well. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. It's been a hopefully great episode of the 10-Minute Life Lesson podcast, brought to you by yourbetteryou.info.